Have you ever seen a face that defies time? I'm not talking about someone who looks younger than her years, but a woman photographed for over a century without aging a single day. Yes, over 100 years, and with the same expression, the same look. It seems impossible, doesn't it? That's the paradox. Impossible, but documented. Before we begin, tell me, are you already subscribed to this channel? If not, take advantage now, because what we're going to investigate today will shake up everything you believe about time, science, and even what it means to be human. And of course, leave a like and comment on what you think is behind this story. It really helps YouTube deliver this content to more mystery lovers like you. This isn't just another urban legend or a story repeated for generations. I'm talking about official records, forensic analysis, and testimonies that, together, form a puzzle that science has yet to solve. And most disturbingly, her last sighting is much more recent than you might think. Get ready, because we're about to dive into a case that blends criminal investigations, paranormal phenomena, and real historical events. And in the end, you'll have to decide, is she a living miracle, a time traveler, or something much darker? I still remember the first time I saw that photograph. It was a sepia-toned image, dated 1870, that I found in a dusty archive of a rural library. In the scene, a young woman, with a serene expression and penetrating gaze, posed in a photography studio. It seemed ordinary at first glance, but there was something disconcerting. It wasn't just the impeccable posture or the period dress. It was as if she were looking straight at me, stepping through time. I spent days returning to that archive, analyzing every detail. The texture of the photographic paper confirmed its authenticity, ruling out the possibility of a recent forgery. Most intriguing was the clarity with which her face stood out, as if the lens had captured something beyond light and shadow. I've seen hundreds of images from the 19th century, but never such a lively gaze. It was as if that woman knew that one day someone would find her. My work as a researcher taught me to identify patterns and also to sense when something simply doesn't add up. In this case, the discomfort stemmed not from a technical error, but from an excess of perfection. There were no imperfections, typical of photography of the time. No smudges, no emulsion smears. It was as if time, quite literally, hadn't touched that piece of paper. The portrait had the strange energy of something that doesn't belong to the past or the present. I kept the photo with me, not on impulse, but because a nagging feeling told me that woman wouldn't just appear there. Something in my gut, the same one that had saved me from being ambushed more than once, screamed that this was only the first clue. And deep down, I knew every clue revealed too soon is merely the door to an even deeper mystery, one that was about to unfold before me. Years after that first encounter with photography, new records began to emerge. And when I say new, I don't mean recent images, but rather old ones that mysteriously showed the same woman. 1890, 1915, 1938. And in all of them, she looked identical to the young woman in the 1870 portrait. Not a wrinkle, not a single feature different. It was as if time had bowed and decided not to touch her. I'd seen instances of striking similarities between people from different eras, but here there was no room for coincidence. I made detailed comparisons of facial features, eye spacing, jaw angle, and everything matched with eerie precision. With each new photo I found, I felt the same uncanny sensation. It wasn't just the same person, it was the same expression, frozen as if waiting for something or someone. What disturbed me most was that, although the clothes and setting varied according to the era, she always seemed out of place. Not because of her costume, which followed local standards, but because of that intense, calculated, almost defiant look in her eyes. It was as if she knew she was being recorded and accepted the moment as part of a larger plan, invisible to us mere mortals. Collecting these images became something of an obsession. I knew that the more evidence I gathered, the closer I would come to understanding who or what that woman was. But deep down, I also felt that each photo was like a silent invitation to delve into something much bigger than I could have imagined. And that's how I discovered that her presence was linked to something even more disturbing. If there's one thing I've learned in decades of investigation, it's that everyone leaves traces, certificates, travel records, contracts. Even the most careful criminal makes mistakes. But with her, it was different. I combed through baptismal records, immigration lists, marriage and death records. Nothing. It was as if this woman had lingered for over a century as an administrative ghost, never officially existing. I spoke with genealogists, historians, and even document forgers. They all came to the same conclusion: there was no legal evidence to prove her identity. And that's not just strange, it's nearly impossible. Even in the 19th century, anyone who moved to a new town or attended a church left records. The silence surrounding her wasn't natural, it was intentional. I began to wonder if this lack of evidence wasn't actually part of the mystery itself. Perhaps someone or something was covering their tracks over time. I've seen entire organizations disappear from the archives because of murky interests, but here, there wasn't one entity claiming authorship, but rather an absence so perfect it seemed like a masterpiece of concealment. This lack of a trail not only heightened my fascination, it also kept me alert, because in an investigation, when you find nothing, it means someone worked hard to keep you from finding anything. And in her case, I realized the next clue wouldn't lie in papers or stamps, but in the strange stories that always surfaced wherever she appeared. It was while analyzing her appearances that I realized something that sent chills down my spine. In at least 3 cities where the woman was photographed, mysterious disappearances occurred shortly thereafter. Young people, usually women, vanished without a trace, as if swallowed by thin air. There were no clues, no bodies, only the suffocating silence of cold cases and shattered families. The first correlation emerged by chance, when crossing dates and locations. In a small coastal town, in 1890, she appears in a photo of a local fair. 2 weeks later, a 19-year-old girl, the daughter of the region's most well-known merchant, disappears without explanation. No sign of escape, no evidence of violence. She simply disappeared. Coincidence? Perhaps. If it weren't for the fact that similar patterns repeat themselves. I began mapping each occurrence, creating a line and dot diagram in my office. With each connection I made, my unease grew. It wasn't just her presence in the vicinity of the disappearances, it was the proximity in time, as if each appearance were the prelude to a dark event. Local investigators at the time seemed to treat them as isolated incidents, but the broader picture revealed a sinister sequence. This direct connection between her image and unresolved tragedies changed the way I viewed the case. She wasn't just a photographic enigma, she was a catalyst for dark events, and I needed to discover whether her involvement was passive, like an inevitable omen, or active, and if so, how far her power or influence might extend. When I began researching accounts of people claiming to have seen this woman in person, I came across a mosaic of conflicting stories. Some described her as a silent, almost ethereal figure, simply watching from a distance. Others swore she spoke, but always in a language no one could identify, a strange, melodic sound impossible to reproduce. It was like trying to remember a dream that dissolves upon waking. I wrote down every single testimony, even the most unlikely, because I've learned that seemingly absurd details can prove crucial. Some said she seemed to move slower than the rest of the world, as if time around her had a different rhythm. An elderly fisherman, for example, said he saw the woman cross the square and swore that, as she walked, the wind and the sounds of the city disappeared for a few seconds. At the same time, I found completely conflicting accounts. A woman who saw her in Paris in the 1950s said she seemed in a hurry, as if she were fleeing from something or someone. The curious thing is that, in each case, no one could say for sure where she went next. It was as if she simply vanished, leaving only the disturbing memory of her presence. These contradictions didn't frustrate me. On the contrary, they fueled my investigation. When different versions overlap, it usually means there's a common thread hidden behind individual perceptions. And I was about to discover that behind each account lay signs of something much deeper, and possibly not human. When I gathered all the known images of this woman, I realized I couldn't rely solely on my trained eye. I took the material to forensic photography experts. It was an opportunity to confirm, with scientific methods, what my instinct already told me: these images were authentic. The result? They all passed the historical verification tests: paper type, pigmentation, wear marks, everything matched the period. The most impressive thing was when the experts enlarged the photos in high resolution. The details of the skin, the strands of hair, even the sparkle in the eyes. Everything remained consistent over the decades. None of the images showed signs of editing, retouching, or duplication. If it were a fraud, it would have been executed with a perfection beyond the reach of any technology available, even in the 20th century. During one of the reviews, an expert pointed out something that made me uneasy. In every photo, the light fell on it almost identically, even when the setting and weather conditions were different. This wasn't just unlikely, it was impossible unless there was some factor controlling or affecting how the light was captured by the lens. I left that lab with the feeling that the visual evidence not only confirmed her real existence, but also revealed a pattern that might hold the key to understanding why, wherever she appeared, time and logic seemed to bend around her. And this clue would lead me to discover a disturbing sequence of geographical coincidences. After mapping every confirmed sighting of this woman, I began to notice something that went far beyond coincidence. The points on the map formed a disturbing pattern. She always appeared in different cities, but with a 20 to 25-year interval between each appearance. And the most curious thing? All the dates coincided, almost surgically, with the autumnal equinox. This was no accident. I remember spending entire nights in my office, surrounded by old maps and newspaper clippings, connecting each dot with red lines. It felt like I was tracing not just someone's path, but the outline of something much larger, a design only she knew in its entirety. It was like following the footprints of a rare animal, always appearing at the same moment in nature's cycle. I spoke with an astronomer who explained that the equinox is a period of perfect balance between light and darkness. This explanation sparked a light in my mind. What if its appearances were linked to some kind of natural or ritualistic phenomenon? I've seen ancient sects use such dates for ceremonies, promising power, protection, or even immortality. This geographic pattern gave me not only a guiding principle, but also a prediction. If the cycle repeated itself, I could know exactly where and when she would appear again. And this possibility was both exciting and dangerous, because it meant I might finally find her, but it also meant she might be waiting for me. My investigation took a dark turn when I found, in a difficult-to-access European archive, references to an occult group active in the late 19th century. They called themselves the Order of Vital Renewal, and according to records, performed rituals to prolong youth and consciousness. The detail that made me hold my breath: one of the accounts described a woman with features identical to hers, present at several ceremonies over the decades. The documents were fragmented, as if someone had tried to destroy the history of this order. Still, I managed to rescue a partially burned parchment, with symbols and notes in Latin that spoke of the cycle of flesh and light, something that, for those familiar with the darker side of the occult, refers to practices of physical preservation through vital energy. And no, this isn't just a legend. I've seen similar things in other cases. A former history teacher, who abandoned his career after alleging persecution by invisible entities, told me that this order had strict rules. No one would age if they completed the full cycle, but the cost would be the lives of others. He didn't go into details, but he did let slip that the dates of the ceremonies coincided with mysterious disappearances, exactly like the ones I've investigated linked to it. This discovery not only connected the woman to a broader historical context, but also gave me the feeling that I was approaching dangerously close to something that should not be revealed. Because if she truly was part of this order, it meant someone, or many, might still be trying to keep these secrets alive. And I already knew that the next clue was engraved on her own body. I've examined dozens of images, and in all of them, she remains identical. The same facial structure, the same impeccable symmetry, no sign of aging. It's not just the absence of wrinkles, it's as if every cell is in a permanent state of freshness. Even her posture remains unchanged, with that calm air and a slight tilt of the head, as if observing the world with infinite patience. In one of the 1915 photos, taken in the midst of World War I, she appears among a group of nurses, while everyone else displayed dark circles under their eyes and signs of exhaustion. She seemed untouched. No trace of physical or emotional wear and tear. It's impossible to survive such difficult times unscathed unless you don't experience them the same way others do. I also noticed that her eyes carry the same glow through the decades, an almost hypnotic gaze, as if they hold a truth none of us could bear to hear. No matter the context, the framing or the lighting, That look is always the same. I've seen criminals and victims look like that, but never for more than a moment. In her case, it's permanent. This physical constancy isn't just bizarre, it's almost a challenge, as if she wants us to notice. As if each photo is a reminder that she's outside the rules of time. And realizing this, I began to understand that her presence wasn't just visual strange phenomena, accompanied each snapshot, almost like a hallmark of her passing. I first noticed this connection when I interviewed a man who, as a child, lived in one of the towns where she appeared. He told me that the week he saw her in the square, the clocks in his house stopped at exactly the same minute and only started working again the next day. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then other stories came in. Many more. Everywhere it appeared, there were stories of sudden changes in temperature, suddenly dropping as if winter had invaded summer. Animals became restless, dogs barked at nothing, horses refused to advance on certain roads. I've been on investigations like this before, and I know that when nature reacts, it's because something truly unusual is happening. One case that struck me was that of a family who swore they heard footsteps inside their home shortly after passing her on the street. The loud footsteps traveled down the hallway, but when they opened the door, no one was there. Interestingly, the oldest woman in the family disappeared 2 days later, and yes, the disappearance is recorded in police records. These events weren't just urban legends, they formed a pattern, a kind of invisible signature she left behind. And to me, they meant only one thing. Wherever this woman was, reality seemed to distort, and I was about to discover that this affected not only her surroundings, but also the people she crossed paths with. The more people I interviewed, the more I became struck by a disturbing detail. Almost all of them described a feeling of profound discomfort when looking into her eyes. It wasn't the usual fear we feel in the face of immediate danger, but something more intimate, as if someone had suddenly rummaged through the most hidden drawers of their mind. Some reported inexplicable anxiety. Others said they felt such intense déjà vu that they swore they'd seen that woman before, even though that was impossible. One artist, for example, confessed to me that, after passing her on a busy street, he spent days dreaming of the same scene, a narrow hallway lit only by a yellowish light, with the woman standing motionless at the end. Some also claimed that, after the encounter, certain habits changed involuntarily. A bank employee reported that he began avoiding mirrors, feeling that something might look back. A teacher said she began forgetting the names of people close to her, as if part of her memory had been erased. These effects lasted for weeks, sometimes months. Based on my experience, I realized this wasn't simply a psychological impression, but rather a potential interference, something capable of influencing emotions and behavior. And if she could affect the minds of those who saw her, it meant we weren't just facing a historical mystery, but an active threat. And clues to this were also in the clothes she chose to wear. Whenever I looked at her photos, I noticed a curious detail. The clothes she wore faithfully followed the style of the time, as if she had a wardrobe that had adapted over the centuries. However, there was something subtle, almost imperceptible, that was off. A cut of fabric that wasn't found in local fashion, a button with an unusual symbol, or a pattern that seemed older than it should have been. This is no small feat. I've investigated criminals who changed identities frequently, and they all made small contextual errors, but she didn't. It was as if she perfectly understood the rules of each period, but chose to insert small visual deviations, perhaps as a personal mark or as a signature for those who knew where to look. In one of the 1938 images, for example, she wears a hat, typical of the period, but the fabric has a pattern that, according to a fashion history expert, was only used in the early 19th century. This doesn't make sense unless she had access to pieces from different eras and intentionally mixed them, almost like a message to anyone who could decipher it. These details led me to believe that her clothes weren't just a disguise, but part of the enigma itself. Perhaps they held hidden meanings. Perhaps they were remnants of past lives, or even trophies of something I dare not imagine. And it was this attention to the smallest details that helped me track down her last confirmed sighting, and it happened more recently than I imagined. It was 2018, in a busy square in Paris. An American tourist, testing his new high-definition camera, took a series of random photos of the landscape. Only later, when reviewing the images at the hotel, did he realize that in one of them, a woman stood, looking directly into the lens, and it was her. The same face, the same expression, without a single sign of aging since the last time she had been photographed decades earlier. I received the photo anonymously, along with a note, "She's back. Don't look for her." Of course, I didn't heed the advice. I enlarged the image, analyzed the light, the reflections, and everything indicated it wasn't a montage. The sharpness of the details was almost disturbing, even revealing tiny fibers in the fabric of the dress, which curiously appeared to have been hand-sewn. What intrigued me most was the context. In the background of the photo, tourists passed by, children played, but no one seemed to notice her. It was as if she were invisible to everyone except the camera lens. This made me wonder if, over all these years, she had appeared in other modern photos without anyone noticing. Knowing it was active and circulating in the 21st century brought a mixture of euphoria and apprehension. After all, if the cycle continued, it meant other strange and possibly dangerous events could be happening right now. And this idea seemed to be confirmed when I discovered that, since then, it had attracted the attention of forces far greater than I had imagined. It didn't take long for me to discover I wasn't the only one tracking this woman. Unofficially leaked documents revealed that at least 2 intelligence services had been monitoring her movements for decades. The files were classified, with entire sections blacked out, but they contained dates and locations that coincided with the sightings I had already mapped. There were reports describing short-lived interactions with civilians and noticeable anomalies in the environment during these sightings. A retired agent, who agreed to meet with me on condition of anonymity, said he was given direct orders to follow and photograph the woman, but lost visual contact with her within seconds, as if she had vanished into thin air. The scariest thing was discovering that there's a team within one of these agencies dedicated exclusively to identifying patterns of human aging. And according to my contact, she's case 0 in that unit. This means that, for them, she's not just a historical curiosity but a potential resource or threat. Knowing that entire governments are investing time and resources in tracking this woman raised a new question. What if they already know what she is and are trying to control or replicate it? This possibility had me racing against time. Because if true, it meant we were one step closer to a secret capable of changing the course of humanity. And the next step would be to look to science and see how it responded to the face that never changed. I took all the images of this woman to a lab specializing in facial biometrics. The goal was simple: apply advanced projection software to estimate what she would look like today if she aged like any other human being. The results were astonishing. If she were an ordinary person, she would be at least 170 years old, and the projection showed a face completely different from the one we see in the photos. These programs use reference points, eye distances, chin shape, skin texture, and even small changes over time. In her case, nothing changed. It's as if time were a concept that simply didn't apply to her body. To the scientist involved, this was a statistical anomaly, so absurd it bordered on the impossible. One of the technicians, with over 20 years of experience, confessed to me that he'd never seen anything like it. He said that, given such unlikely results, there are only 2 explanations. Either the dataset is flawed, which wasn't the case, since all the images were authentic, or we're dealing with a biological phenomenon that science still can't explain. These tests not only reinforced my suspicions, but also opened the door to much bolder theories. If biology couldn't explain it, perhaps we were talking about something beyond it: time manipulation, parallel realities, or even time travel. And it was precisely this line of reasoning that led me to hear the most controversial theories about its existence. When I began to consider that the explanation for the case might involve time itself, I realized I was entering dangerous and fascinating territory. Some theories suggested she might be a time traveler, someone who moves between decades like someone crossing streets. Others spoke of frozen time, a state in which the passage of years no longer has a physical effect on the body. I spoke with theoretical physicists who, while skeptical, admitted that phenomena like time dilation have been observed at subatomic scales. The big question was, how could something like this apply to a human being? One of them told me about experimental hypotheses of extreme gravitational fields, capable of slowing down time locally. But all of this, he said, still belonged to the realm of theory, at least officially. Meanwhile, I began noticing a curious detail in the photos. In several of them, objects in the background seemed slightly out of focus, as if the light around them were distorted. It's the kind of distortion I've seen in photographs when there's electromagnetic interference or when something affects the very fabric of space-time. These clues pointed to an intriguing possibility. Perhaps she wasn't simply protected from time, but was able to shape it. And if this were true, then each encounter with her could be altering reality in ways we can't yet comprehend. And this insight only gained strength when I analyzed her videotaped behavior. The photographs were already intriguing enough, but the few videos in which she appears add a new layer of mystery. In all the recordings, her movements are smooth, almost choreographed, as if she knows exactly when and where to move to avoid attracting attention. Still, there are moments when she seems to notice the camera, and in those moments her gaze fixes on the viewer in a disconcerting way. The 1994 video, accidentally captured during a street festival, shows her walking through a crowd. In less than 3 seconds, she passes from shadow to light without a change in expression on her face. It's as if she's disconnected from the hustle and bustle around her, as if the world were merely a stage through which she passes. In more recent recordings, this characteristic is even more evident. She avoids any direct interaction with people, but she doesn't seem rushed or nervous. She never runs, never looks back. It's as if she's in complete control of the situation, even in places where it would be impossible to go unnoticed. I've seen trained spies and criminals try to maintain this level of neutrality, and none have achieved it so perfectly. These video recordings made me believe that she not only survives the passing of time, but also dominates her surroundings. A calculated, almost predatory dominance, and it was this realization that led me to the next step in my investigation. A missing artifact that could hold answers to her true nature. In 1955, an antique dealer in a small town in France claimed to have acquired an unusual diary. The pages, written in faded ink, contained enigmatic phrases about renewing the flesh and escaping death by exchanging essence. What caught my attention was the man's description of the supposed author, a young woman with flawless skin and an intense gaze. I recognized her immediately. It was her. According to the antique dealer, the diary looked very old, but it was in perfect condition. He remembered detailed notes about dates and places that, when cross-referenced with my database, coincided with her appearances in different countries. There were also drawings of strange symbols, some identical to those he had previously found in documents related to the Order of Vital Renewal. Unfortunately, before I could deliver the diary to a local historian, it mysteriously disappeared. The store was broken into, but nothing but the diary was taken. No money, no valuables. This led me to believe someone was willing to do anything to prevent its contents from coming to light. The existence of this diary, even without the pages in hand, served as confirmation that the woman was not just a historical enigma, but that she kept intentional records of her movements and practices. And this discovery became even more intriguing when, years later, I found a reference to a name that might have been used by her. Among the dusty records of an old Vienna hotel, dated 1938, I found an entry that made me pause. The name written down was Isolde Vin, a 3-night guest. So far nothing special, but the physical description given by the clerk on the form was unmistakable. Young woman, dark hair, steady gaze, flawless skin. It was her, without a shadow of a doubt. I searched the name in public archives, immigration lists, and passport records. Nothing. Isolde V didn't officially exist. The only additional clue came from a marginal note in the hotel book, "Speaks with an unknown accent." This reinforced the pattern already identified in the testimonies. A language no one could identify, but which seemed to carry an almost hypnotic tone. The strangest thing was discovering that during the same period, 2 disappearances occurred in the city, a music student and a local watchmaker. Investigations at the time found no connection between them, but for me, the temporal coincidence was impossible to ignore. Once again, her presence seemed to be the invisible thread connecting seemingly isolated tragedies. This clue reinforced my conviction that she used false names to move between times and places, obscuring any concrete trace. But even so, there was a pattern that even she couldn't hide. And this pattern led me to the most disturbing question of the entire investigation. Who or what is she really? After years of collecting photos, reports, documents, and impossible to ignore coincidences, I've come to a simultaneously frustrating and fascinating conclusion. there's no definitive answer to who or what this woman really is. Each lead I've followed has led me to new mysteries, as if the case itself were alive and reinventing itself to remain unattainable. If it were merely a historical hoax, it would have been debunked by now. If it were merely an urban legend, it wouldn't stand up to the weight of physical evidence. But it exists, and this existence defies the laws of biology, physics, and even logic. This places it in a dangerous space between science and the unexplainable, where theories mingle with fear and fascination. The most disturbing thing is the thought that she's still out there, perhaps walking among us right now, watching and listening, invisible to the unwary. And if my pattern-based prediction is correct, it won't be long before she reappears. When that happens, the question will no longer be who is she, but what does she want? For now, the case remains officially closed, due to lack of conclusive physical evidence. But I know this is just the surface. And if there's one thing I've learned in my career, it's that some secrets don't want to be revealed until the exact moment they need to be. And I feel that moment is getting closer and closer. Now that you know all the details, tell me, if this woman appeared in your city tomorrow, would you follow her or cross the street? More than a historical mystery, this case is an invitation to question what we know and, most importantly, what we prefer not to know. Could it be that we live surrounded by phenomena like this, but simply don't notice? Perhaps her secret lies not in time, but in the way she manipulates it, or in something we can't even name. What if I told you there are other similar cases hidden in the most secret archives I've ever accessed? Well, this story could be just the tip of the iceberg. The important thing now is, what will you do with this information? Will you leave it as an internet curiosity, or will you start observing the world with different eyes? Pay attention, because sometimes the answer we seek is right in front of us. But it takes courage to see it. So, if you want to continue exploring these mysteries with me, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave your comment. I want to know your theory. Is she human, immortal, or something we can't even fathom?